I'm here with Bryan Knouse. Bryan's the founder and CEO of a project called OWL. Bryan, great to see you. Thanks for joining me on camera.
Yeah, of course. Great to see you as well.
Welcome to Sydney in Australia. Now, we're not going to go into too much detail about why you're here specifically, other than that you're keynoting about your project and particularly what I'd like to talk about, which is the Call4Code project. So maybe just a bit of background for viewers initially. Call4Code is essentially a global hackathon. I think last year it reached about, 152 countries from memory. Hundreds of thousands of people took place. A bunch of people like yourself who registered, took part in a project to sort of build software and hardware solutions to deal with emergency scenarios, right? Could you maybe just give us your take on the Call4Code project initially from the 30,000 foot point of view and what your experience was like from the registration process through to the point where you won the event? And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. So it's interesting. I've been engaging the hackathon and meetup community in New York City for several years prior to Call4Code, and I was very fortunate to get to know a few IBMers along the way. And one of them, a very close friend of mine, Bruce Weed, called me up. I was in a Starbucks in Boston, I think last May, and he got a call and he said, "Hey, IBM's putting together a technology competition. You've got to take part in this." So from that moment on, I was very intrigued by what was going on. I'm very aware of the technology competition space, and I thought not only was the competition well architected, it was on an awesome topic, and IBM had put a lot of resources behind supporting the developers in this initiative to build amazing projects. So for me, it wasn't even a question to compete in it. I was engaged from the very start.
A bit of a no-brainer. And you do have a pedigree of entering competitions, particularly hackathons. I mean, how many have you done roughly? I mean, from reading your profile, it looked like dozens. It's probably more like hundreds, I'm guessing.
Yeah, hundreds.
Lots. And varied types, but I think this one, as you said, a lot of us gravitated to it for a range of reasons. It's sort of, solving world hunger in many ways.
Yeah.
But specifically, we never really know when we're all going to be impacted by some form of crisis, whether it's the flood. I know you worked on the Puerto Rico event in particular, which made sense for the whole ducks thing, which we'll come back to in a minute. In Australia, we have fires and droughts and things and so forth. So maybe just, I would love for folk who are watching to kind of get a sense of what your experience was like through that moment from the Starbucks as to how did you get involved in getting registered? How did you get on board? What was that journey like? Maybe just a little bit of detail about getting started, because I'd like to inspire thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of others to repeat your journey and let's hope the success of going from that idea of, okay, I'm going to participate. What were the key steps through the registration, the onboarding, and just even forming a team?
So IBM makes it really easy to get involved with the Call4Code. Just go to the website, register, you'll be put onto the newsletter roll, as well as join the Slack, and that's where you can have an active communication with anyone else in the Call4Code. In fact, last year, one of the members on our founding team we found through the Call4Code Slack. So in the very beginning of the competition, people were chatting, throwing ideas out, seeing what everyone was interested in, and one gentleman mentioned some stuff he was interested in, really passionate about this space, and I remember distinctly having a call with him, and his passion and his creativity and technical ability was just apparent from the first moment. And we had gotten to chatting, how can we work together? Like, you have this amazing skill set, I've got some good stuff I can work on, there's some other people on our team who are really passionate about this, and we kind of put the pieces together for what we were going to work on from there. So I would say getting involved is very easy in the Call4Code. IBM is everywhere, and it's very easy to just go online, get involved, and start looking at other people who are working on solutions, what they're working on, speak to them, learn from them. And then the code patterns on IBM.com are, I think, the single best way to learn how to build technology. I really actually don't like API reference manuals. It really frustrates me when I'm trying to build a solution and they say, oh, it's in the API spec, and it's like reading an encyclopedia. Who wants to do that? What I want to do is look at other projects people have made and said, I really like that, I'm going to take that piece. I really like that, and I'm going to take that piece. And we're going to glue all these different pieces together to make a whole new project that no one's seen before. That's something new and inventive, and it's really easy to do. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to be able to do this. So there's no excuse not to take part in the Call4Code. It's so easy to get involved, and there's so many resources IBM has put behind it to get you to where you need to go to build an amazing solution.
That's the best glossy brochure ever. And I want to come back to the whole design patterns and the tools that you used from IBM and the whole open source concept, because I agree with you that my generation, let's say, I'm a little bit older than you, we did have to sit down with the manuals and go through and get to page 73 and figure out what the thing needed to talk to. These days, there's so much code out that you can use and refactor and kind of not so much cheat from, but borrow from, that I think speeds that process up. So the onboarding process is pretty simple. It's like, go to the website, register, get on board. I think the next phase of that was just what you were talking about there, which is forming a team, right? From what I understand, it's easier as a team. I think the idea is that to form the team, whether you're around the world or independently, and then find that challenge. So you essentially had a few people, from what I understand, in your team already. Found another one through Slack. Some of the other teams are disparate people around the world, from what I understand. They didn't even actually get together in physical sense.
Well, and that's true for our team too. Our 5 core members on the founding team were never actually in one single location until the final Call for Code event.
Wow.
But this is the world we live in, and this is actually a good thing,
yeah.
that we can find passionate, creative, really smart individuals from anywhere in the world. I remember having conversations early in Call for Code with people from pretty much every single continent.
Right.
Like, how cool is that? We're all here for this one mission, and I didn't have to travel anywhere. And as much as I love being here in Australia, you don't have to get on a plane to go 10,000 miles to meet other passionate people who you might work really well with. So being able to tear down those previous borders of location and geography and culture, and access people through Slack, through the internet, through the web, through initiatives like Call for Code, you can really find an all-star team who's passionate about the same things you are.
Brilliant, and I guess it also lends itself to the fact that you can remove a lot of bias around the idea that if we design a solution for Australia or New Zealand or the North American region, it comes with a natural bias of what I've experienced, what I've seen, as opposed to what I think you managed to achieve, which is a global team that was formed with a global view and then attack something like the Puerto Rico event. So tell us a little bit about why you chose that particular event. What was it that made you decide that was the thing for you, the concept of a flooded region? Took a long time to get to the point where any help even got in there. It seemed to me that underpinned a lot of the design that you put in place, and that is that distributing these devices that you call ducts, using your OWL platform for sort of coordinating that. How did that leap out as the challenge that you wanted to tackle?
So I thought the focus on natural disasters was a really good one by IBM, because it's not traditionally a space when people want to build a startup or work on new technology. It's not, I think, the first thing everyone jumps to.
Right.
But uniquely, at the same time, it's something everyone deals with. I mean, there isn't a region in the world that doesn't have to handle some type of natural disaster that's beyond their control. And in particular, where me and several others from my team, we are distributed, but at the time we were in Call for Code, we had members in Houston, Texas, North Carolina, and New York City.
Wow.
And the Eastern Seaboard, as well as Houston, Texas, has been really, really badly hit by hurricanes in recent years. Hurricane Maria was still fresh on everyone's minds when the Call for Code started, and it wasn't just that it was a destructive hurricane. Hurricane Maria destroyed everything, not just the physical manifestations of society like houses, buildings, homes, but hospital networks, communications, relationships, economic prosperity. And still to this day, we went down about a month or two ago in March with the IBM Corporate Service Corps to deploy a pilot of our technology.
Okay.
There are still regions of Puerto Rico that haven't been connected. It's 18 months later, and
it's mind-boggling, isn't it?
We assume, it's crazy. We assume in Australia or in the US, these are very developed nations. They can handle this. These disasters destroy absolutely everything, regardless of who you are, where you are. Are you rich? Are you poor? Are you of this culture? Race, ethnicity. It doesn't matter. Everyone has to deal with these problems, and so it's an easy thing to get motivated about because it's such a massive problem. And even in the U.S., hurricanes alone last year caused $50 billion in economic damage. Hurricanes alone.
It's a pretty good business case to help solve that problem,
right? Hurricanes, this is a strange way to say it, but the hurricane industry would be one of the biggest in the United States. If you can even mitigate 1% of that, you're doing something massively important to the world.
I think when I look at these things, I often look at it from the point of view that there can be no better business case than saving a life. If you start from that point of view, if there's an incident response of some form and they can leverage your platform and they save one life alone, that beyond anything just makes it worthwhile. So maybe tell us a little about the solution you built. So you built a platform that allowed you to sort of manage the logistics and all the organizational components and so forth. And you can get to that via web interface and other tools, and I'm assuming an app now. And then you had the infrastructure component that essentially was dropped into the areas. And I think from memory, you 3D printed the little nodes. They're effectively a mesh Wi-Fi node. Maybe firstly tell us about the two parts. So start with the OWL platform. I think that is essentially the orchestration platform. So
OWL, the inspiration came from a couple different places, but OWL OWLS is an acronym. It stands for Organization, Whereabouts, and Logistics, and those are kind of the key elements we wanted to support in disaster response. But we also thought it was a nice metaphor, you know, an animal. Birds of prey in particular have really good eyesight, but owls, even amongst birds of prey, have really good eyesight in the dark.
They do.
And we were hoping that our software solution could be somewhat of a night vision under the darkness and confusion of a natural disaster, which is often the case because when communications and infrastructure networks get knocked offline, you almost like descend hundreds of years into the past.
Things go dark, right?
Things go dark. You have no ability to coordinate and organize a response through the traditional means you're used to. And it really, if you've ever experienced this, it feels like you're going back to caveman times to some degree.
In fact, I had a conversation with someone about this last night, and they referred to a particular incident I won't describe now as being sent back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, well, that's a horrific thing to think about, but it literally was what they're experiencing, and that's here in Australia. So the OWL platform is essentially your coordination space. You can do everything from mapping, and I imagine you're pulling in things like IBM's data from the weather company and other things.
Lots of data, lots of APIs. We're leveraging IBM Watson to analyze that data. So one of the things, computers and humans work well in different ways, and we can complement each other really effectively. Humans struggle to look at 1 million rows of data in a spreadsheet quickly without getting overwhelmed, or it's impossible. That's the type of thing computers are really good at. So we can feed a whole lot of data, more data than any person could ever parse through, into this system and pull out the really key elements of it, and then provide that key information back to the first responders so they don't have to spend all their time, energy, and get stressed out sifting through all this information, most of which won't be valuable. They can just see the really key insights they need to do their job as effectively as possible.
I love that, because it allows them to be the subject matter experts in whatever they are, whether a firefighter, a fire engine driver, or whatever, as opposed to trying to be a mathematician. So tell us about the second piece. So there's a distributed network piece, right? And from the latest I've seen, you can use as little as 5 of these ducts. They're 3D printed sort of hexagonal style shape devices that you put compute power in, storage, Wi-Fi. They mesh to each other. You can drop them into space. I imagine you can throw them in there and they float as well. But they would probably be easily dropped into space in somewhere like Australia where there's not necessarily a flood but a drought. Tell us about how that design came about, what's actually sort of in there, and where are they at now as far as being deployed in the field?
Yeah, so while we felt the OWL could be a really powerful solution, it also happens that the worst disasters, the most complicated ones with the most chaos and misinformation, these are also the ones where traditional infrastructure networks are most likely to be offline.
Right.
So you have this almost compounding problem of the worse a disaster gets, the more problems that occur.
And they compound, right?
They compound over time. So it's, you know, if you think like an exponential curve, every little bit more disaster gets worse, everything else just gets so much more messed up. So we had this challenge of how do we leverage cloud technology, data, AI in a region that has been sent back to the Stone Age, right? Because they, as far as I understand, did not have computers or iPhones.
Not the last time I looked.
So that provided us the inspiration to come up with the duck link. And what the duck link is it's a descendant of the OWL in some ways, and it enables us to deploy the OWL to regions that otherwise have no infrastructure, electricity, or communications networks. They're these little battery-powered devices with a couple different communications technologies, Wi-Fi, as well as a long-range radio. And I think the key for us was to really make it as simple as possible. A lot of times at hackathons, you see these sophisticated solutions with crazy acronyms that talk about all this science. And while that's great, for all the engineers, that's fantastic. We're going back to the Stone Age. We need things that people don't have to think about at all that enable them to do the things they need to do. And so creating these really simple ducts, they have one button, on and off. You can deploy them. As long as they're in range, they'll talk to each other, and they help us deploy the OWL to these regions.
The thing that really struck me with it as well, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is it appears to me, with all the homework I've done, and I've watched a bunch of unboxing and unpacking to see what's in them, it seemed to me that once you deploy this platform for the insights and the analytics and so forth, leveraging cloud, big data, and even sentiment analysis, I imagine, from Watson, if things are happy and bad messaging, you've now got the infrastructure rolled out with the mesh network. What it actually did was allowed people to just use their standard devices. So I think you mentioned in an interview recently where you effectively wanted that Starbucks experience. Walk into your smartphone, the screen pops up, now you're on the Wi-Fi. Go to an airport, as I've done recently in the last few weeks, the network pops up, right?
Yeah.
So, everyone's got a smartphone, hopefully they're charged up or good battery. They go, if you deploy this, all of a sudden you pop up on the screen, now they've got information, now they can get decision making, so forth. That to me was like this eureka moment you must have had, was like, let's just connect to existing things by deploying mobile infrastructure. Was that kind of a moment that happened, or just naturally took place?
Yeah, I think the most eureka moment we had was when all of these different pieces glued together.
Right.
Right? Because all of these things, this captive portal technology, the Wi-Fi tech, the cloud software incident management system, they do exist to some capacity in previous manifestations. It's gluing all these different pieces together to make one holistic and, again, very simple solution.
Yep.
One thing we knew was going to be really, really difficult to ask of people in the middle of a natural disaster is, hey, do you mind downloading our app or going to our website?
Not going to happen, right?
Who wants to do that? And not only that, but that's just a terrible thing to do. It's can you stop asking me to do this and come save me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So we were able to leverage this technology, and one of I think the clever strokes we had was to provide the Wi-Fi network that automatically popped up on the screen. So you don't even really have to know how to use our technology. It just finds itself into your system so that you can operate and communicate in the ways you need to when you need it most.
Well, now, my final question for you, because I know you've got something important to go to next as far as your time on stage here with some of the hackathons. Where to next? I mean, you alluded to going to space recently with balloons and things. I mean, there are a number of exciting things, and we could talk all day on it. I'd love to have you on the podcast after this for a slightly more in-depth detail, talk about the technology and so forth. But just a final question on where do you go from here? You formed an organization, you've now won this, you've got a bit of funding, I guess. You've got some opportunities to deploy this in a commercial sense. You've put it into space in a sense. Where does it go from here? I mean, once people go through this hackathon experience with Call for Code, they whether they win or not, they've got a capability. Where do you go with this? So what's the brief sort of view of that next for you?
So I think there's a couple really important missions for us to execute on, and I'm a technology guy. I think most of the people in this hackathon are technologists. There's a part of me that just wants to sit in a room with all these people and talk about all the amazing things we can build and different ways we can leverage this technology. And on the engineering side, that's, how can we deploy this technology in new inventive ways that can still achieve our original mission, but do it even better? And one of those ways we can think about is deploying to space. And why we're interested in that, of course, apart from the fact that it's just amazing, is that deploying networks on the ground where hurricanes and natural disasters have destroyed communities, that technology also has to survive these issues, and that's quite a tall order. However, communications tech works really effectively in space, and it can kind of sit above any terrible disaster that's happening on the ground. So we can provide that networking connectivity at all times before, during, and after a disaster without being fearful that 150-mile-an-hour winds are just going to take the ducks and fly them away. And that's the engineering piece. The second piece is, now that we've been fortunate to win the Call for Code, we have to move forward as a company to scale the organization if we want to have a scaled impact. And one of the most exciting things for me to see is our Slack channel was 5 founding members during the Call for Code competition. Today we're at almost 100. Wow. So we're really interested to any developer around the world who might be interested in Call for Code to work with them as well. If you want to take part in our solution, join our Slack, talk to us. Perfect. We want to invent new creative solutions, and that comes from anywhere, from anyone, from any country, race, ethnicity, age, gender. And we really want to leverage open source, not necessarily as a coding concept, but as an entire concept for an organization.
I like it. Well, congratulations again on winning last year. Are you taking part this year? You probably got too much on your plate.
I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I will definitely be present at Call for Code events, and I definitely want to engage the competitors and provide any feedback and support I can and motivation for people to go out and compete.
You definitely inspired me. Yeah. Well, it's been great to see you. Thank you so much. Welcome again to Sydney. I'm sure you'll have a great time over the next few days.
Already having a great time. People said it's winter here, but that's just
it's Australia.
If this is winter here, I'm leaving New York tomorrow.
Good to hear. So. Well, thank you so much again for catching up with me, and we'll definitely have you on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing what the next 12 to 18 months holds for you, and can't wait to see a duck in space.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.